I was born in Marshall County, and when I was 6 months old, my family moved to Alabama City there because that's where the cotton mill was. And my mother and father went to work in a cotton mill, and I was a little fella. But ever since I was a real small individual, I wanted to be a soldier. I'd take all the tests and everything else and pass them, and then it'd come back I didn't weigh enough, I wasn't old enough. So I finally got after a few months at that, I got the pastor of 12th Street Baptist Church. My mother signed affidavits how old I was because we had no birth certificates. Gunnersville, Alabama, where I was born in Marshall County, was destroyed by a tornado back in the early 30s, and all the records were gone. So after going through all this process, they finally let me in.
Ola Mize enlisted in the Army in April of 1950. Lured by an additional $50 a month to jump out of aircraft, he became a member of the 82nd Airborne. Mize was just finishing his tour when the Korean War broke out, so he re-enlisted and volunteered for the front lines. On June 15, 1953, Mize was serving on the main line, where he was responsible for the defense of a position called Outpost Harry. His orders were to hold it at all costs.
During our first few days up on Harry, at night we kept seeing trucks coming up behind the mountains in front of us. I kept begging for artillery, airstrikes or something that they was building up so in front of us. They kept telling me that they're only resupplying their troops like we'd resupply ours. And there ain't no way in hell we'd ever resupply ours with bunking trucks up, lights on and everything else. And I said, well, if they're only resupplying the people they've got here, they must have the whole Chinese army in front of us, because there's 20, 40, or 50, or 100 trucks a night coming in for 5 straight days. At night, when I'd go around checking our platoon and to make sure that there's at least 50% alert, I got back and I got a call from my weapons squad leader that something was wrong out in front of his position. He couldn't figure out what it was. I got over there and I said, what's wrong? He said, well, there's something wrong with the terrain out in front of me. Well, I climbed up there looking over the trench line, and it was within 10 yards of our trenches. Bushes all over the place. Well, the first thing I said, where the hell did all them bushes come from? And about that time, a few of them moved. I just automatically started spraying the hell out of it, all them bushes. There's bodies falling all over the place there. Well, about that time, they kicked off the artillery on us. I mean, they opened up, I thought the end of the world had come. I started sandbagging everybody in. Well, as I was putting the sandbags in, the artillery round hit right behind me, and I thought I'd blow it all to pieces. It drove me into the timbers at the bunker. And when I got my conscience back, my medic, there was about 6 on top of him, and they killed him before I could get to him. But I done them the same favor. As I went by the heavy machine gun position, I heard a movement. I said, who is in there? And it was my BAR man, him and his assistant. So I said, what in the devil are you doing in there? You're supposed to be down in that bunker in your position down there. They was up at the standoff, just getting some air up there because it's hot that time of year. When all the artillery hit and it scared them to death, they jumped in that bunker and they lost their weapons and everything. They didn't even have a weapon. Well, there ain't no time to chastise people on the circumstance. So I told them, I said, here's my empty magazine. Start loading them things. You got a case of carbine ammunition there. And about that time, they started pouring over the trench lines. For the next 2 hours, all I was doing was just shooting Chinese as fast as they come over that trench line. We was filling the trench up with them, and the 2 guys there was recharging my magazine. Well, I told them to come over with me, and we climbed over the stuff, and it just was getting to the platoon command bunker. There was one of my BAR men fighting with 6 Chinese, and he had it by the butt with a tripod stuck out, swinging at him. They had bandoliers hanging all over him, and these Chinese was trying to capture him. And I shot them. I said, why in the world are you not using that BAR right? It's a lot better if you load your magazines and shoot that thing rather than try to use it as a club. He said, I can't. I said, what, you got all that? He said, that's carbine ammunition. I said, you're stupid. I said, the only thing that comes in bandoliers is M1, 8-round clips. Carbine ammunition comes in cartons, like I've taught you people. Well, I was wrong. Nobody had told us about the new 10-round clip of carbine ammunition, and I started checking my dead, and all of them had carbine ammunition with M1 rifle or BAR. And boy, I was hostile.
With all of the company's officers dead or wounded, Mize worked frantically to establish a defensive perimeter. He then assembled a patrol that moved from bunker to bunker, making their force look larger than it was. At one point, seeing an enemy soldier taking dead aim at a comrade, Mize dispatched the man with one shot. Although he was struck by artillery and grenade blasts 3 times, he managed to escape serious harm and continued to fight. Mize was eventually able to secure a radio and call in airstrikes, which exacted a devastating toll on the enemy.
I didn't know how I looked. My clothes were blowed off there, and my face was all black and burnt from where I'd been burnt from flash, and mouth, sand in my mouth because we didn't have no water or anything like that, and you'd try to rake it out, and I couldn't spit. My life depended on it. As I got down to the MLR, they told me, said, soldier, you're going the wrong way. I said, no, sir, I'm not. They said, who are you? And I said, I'm Sergeant Mize. They said, no, you're not. Sergeant Mize is dead. I said, I hope not, sir. I'm standing talking to you. And I didn't know how I looked. I couldn't recognize myself either. President Eisenhower ordered me back to the States to receive the medal. Got it September 7th, 1954. I was scared to death. Here, a little country boy from northeast Alabama, redneck, meeting the President of the United States, it was unreal. And he stood there and talked to me. He put the medal around my neck. And he seen how nervous I was. And he told me, he said, I would be too. If I was as young as you was, looking the old crow like it, I just broke the ice. I made myself a promise over there, if I stayed in the military or had any kind of authority, what happened to me on Outpost Harry and my people, that's the way I look at it as my people, because I was the one taking care of them. It would never happen again. I didn't care what happened to me personally. I come from the old school that you can take all the principles of leadership and traits and put them under one thing. It's called custodian and men's welfare. You can put everything under that umbrella. And I've lived with that code. It cost me a lot of heartaches, but it's worth it, every bit of it.